South America is often sold as the ultimate exotic bargain. Colorful streets, dramatic landscapes, legendary food, and prices that look almost too good to be true. But stray just slightly from the main route, or worse, choose the wrong city, and that dream trip can quickly turn into stress, confusion, or something far more serious. Today, we're ranking South American cities you should avoid at all costs, along with a few that are actually safe. These are cities that look perfect on paper, famous landmarks, vibrant culture, great prices, but hide serious drawbacks you only start to notice after you land. Especially number 15. A city in a country that's been dominating headlines lately, where even its president would probably not recommend visiting right now. And before we dive in, think about this for a moment. Which South American city looked perfect in your travel dreams, but turned into a harsh reality once you got there? Keep watching. There's a very real chance that city shows up today. And now, let's start with number 15. A city that's become surprisingly popular in recent days, just not for the reasons it would ever want. Once known as one of South America's wealthiest capitals, built on oil money, modernist ambition, and big dreams, it's now mentioned for entirely different reasons. Do you know the name already? Number 15. Caracas. Until very recently, Caracas wasn't a city most American travelers actively had on their radar. It existed more as a memory, a cautionary example, or a city people talked about in the past tense. That changed fast. Over the last days and weeks, the country has once again dominated global attention, and when that happens, the capital is inevitably pulled into the spotlight. Not for tourism, not for culture, but for instability no visitor ever hopes to encounter. This isn't about long-term history anymore. It's about timing. Right now, political tension and uncertainty at the national level are creating conditions that shift quickly and without warning. And for travelers, unpredictability is often more dangerous than clearly defined risks. Transportation, payments, access to services, things tourists usually take for granted, can suddenly become complicated overnight. What makes Caracas especially frustrating is that, in many ways, the people are the exact opposite of the situation around them. Venezuelans are widely known for being warm, expressive, and deeply social. Conversations come easily. Help is often offered without being asked. Many locals still carry real pride in their city and remember when Caracas was modern, confident, and full of ambition during its oil-fueled golden years. And that's the irony. On paper, the city still has culture, history, and human warmth going for it. The problem isn't the people, it's everything surrounding them. Even the most welcoming atmosphere can't compensate for a system under strain. Caracas may one day stabilize and reclaim some of what it once was. But at this moment, despite its people and its past, it's simply not a place where travel makes sense. Sometimes the smartest decision isn't avoiding a city forever, but knowing when not to go. And now, let's move on to number 14. A city where many travelers ask themselves the same question almost immediately after landing. Why is it so hard to breathe? Number 14. La Paz. This city doesn't ease you into the experience. It hits you immediately. For many travelers, the very first challenge appears before customs, before baggage claim, sometimes before they even leave the jet bridge. The air feels thin. Your chest tightens, and suddenly, excitement is replaced by a quiet thought. Something feels off. The reason is simple and unavoidable. La Paz sits more than 11,000 feet above sea level, where the air contains significantly less oxygen than at lower elevations. Your lungs are working harder, your heart rate increases, and your body struggles to deliver oxygen the way it normally would. This isn't a fitness issue. Even healthy, active travelers feel it almost immediately. What makes this city particularly difficult is how fast the change happens. Many visitors arrive directly from sea-level cities, with no time to acclimate. Everyday actions, walking uphill, climbing stairs, even talking for long periods, can suddenly feel exhausting. Headaches, dizziness, and nausea aren't rare. They're common first-day experiences. La Paz forces you to slow down, whether your itinerary allows for it or not. travelers who ignore the altitude often end up spending valuable time resting instead of exploring. The city isn't dangerous in the traditional sense, it's demanding in a physical one, and that demand catches people off guard. There are rewards for those who adapt. The views stretch endlessly. The culture feels deeply rooted and unaffected by tourism trends. Locals move through the city with an ease that only comes from living at this altitude their entire lives. La Paz doesn't punish carelessness, it simply exposes it. And for travelers unprepared for its elevation, the city makes its presence known in the most personal way possible. And speaking of carelessness, the next city punishes it almost instantly. Not because it's chaotic or extreme, but because a single moment of unawareness can cost you far more than you expect. Number 13. Recife. One traveler summed it up perfectly. It felt like the kind of place where nothing happens until something does. That sentence comes up again and again when people describe their experience here. On the surface, the city feels relaxed. Warm weather, ocean views, beachside neighborhoods, and a pace that invites you to drop your guard just a little. And that's exactly where the problem starts. Recife doesn't overwhelm you the way some cities do. It eases you in. The streets feel lively rather than threatening. Locals go about their routines. Tourists walk around with phones out, bags loose, attention drifting. And unlike places where danger feels obvious, here it often arrives quietly. A distracted moment at a crosswalk, a phone checked too casually, a bag worn the wrong way. That's when things tend to happen. The issue isn't constant chaos, it's contrast. Certain areas feel perfectly fine during the day and change noticeably after dark. The transition isn't always obvious to visitors, especially those unfamiliar with the city's layout. Street crime here relies less on force and more on opportunity, and unawareness creates opportunity. What makes this frustrating is that Recife has genuine appeal. The coastline is beautiful, the food scene is strong, the culture is deeply rooted and expressive, but enjoying those positives requires a level of alertness many travelers don't expect to maintain on what looks like a laid-back coastal trip. Recife doesn't feel dangerous in the way people expect danger to look. That's exactly why it catches so many visitors off guard. The city rewards confidence, but quietly punishes complacency. And for travelers who confuse a relaxed atmosphere with low risk, the realization often comes too late to rewind the moment that caused it. Number 12. Fortaleza. In Fortaleza, the problem isn't danger, crowds, or shock. It's dependency. From the moment you arrive, this is a city where independence quietly stops working the way travelers expect it to. Walking isn't always practical. Distances are deceptive. Neighborhoods change quickly, and not in ways that are obvious to visitors. You don't explore this city, you move through it with help. Most travelers end up relying on intermediaries almost immediately. Hotel staff decide where you should go. Drivers determine how you get there. Recommendations replace curiosity. Spontaneity fades fast, not because it's forbidden, but because it's inefficient. Every decision takes longer than expected, and every small mistake compounds. This creates a strange kind of friction. You're not unsafe, but you're not in control either. A short trip becomes a coordination exercise. Missed timing means waiting. A wrong assumption means backtracking. Even simple plans require confirmation, reassurance, and sometimes negotiation. What frustrates many visitors is that none of this is obvious up front. The city doesn't warn you, it doesn't overwhelm you, it just quietly shifts the balance of power away from the traveler. And for people used to navigating cities on their own terms, that loss of autonomy is exhausting. Fortaleza doesn't punish recklessness or reward confidence. It tests patience, and for travelers who expect a city to reveal itself through movement and curiosity, this one offers a different lesson. Here, freedom isn't assumed, it's arranged. And if losing control was frustrating, the next city replaces it with uncertainty. Here, the problem isn't how you move, but what you can actually rely on. Number 11. Quito. What unsettles travelers here isn't one bad moment, it's the feeling that the ground keeps shifting under your plans. Quito is a city where nothing clearly goes wrong, yet very little feels fully reliable, and that subtle instability follows visitors longer than they expect. At first, it's easy to dismiss. A service works one day, but not the next. A route that seems fine suddenly feels questionable. Advice changes depending on who you ask. None of this triggers alarm bells on its own, but together it creates constant hesitation. You start double-checking things you normally wouldn't. Departure times, payment methods, which areas are fine today. The city forces travelers into a reactive mindset. You stop planning ahead and start adapting in short increments. That may sound manageable, but over several days it becomes draining. Every decision carries an unspoken maybe, and that uncertainty reshapes how you move, where you go, and how much you trust your own judgment. This isn't a city that pushes back aggressively, it nudges. It quietly asks you to stay alert, without telling you exactly what to watch for. Neighborhoods don't announce their mood shifts. Rules aren't posted clearly. Situations evolve without explanation, leaving visitors unsure whether they missed something or whether the situation simply changed again. Quito isn't chaotic, and it isn't openly hostile, but it lacks the consistency many American travelers rely on to feel comfortable. The city doesn't reward confidence or punish mistakes. It simply refuses to stay predictable long enough for visitors to relax. By the end of the trip, many travelers can't point to a single failure. They just feel tired, mentally spent, and that exhaustion, more than any headline risk, is what defines the experience here. Number 10. Valparaiso. This is one of those cities people feel like they already know before they arrive. The photos do most of the work. Colorful houses stacked on hills, street art everywhere, old funiculars climbing toward ocean views. Expectations are set long before the plane lands, and that's where the trouble begins. Valparaiso is exhausting in ways travelers don't anticipate. The city isn't built to be observed casually, it's built to be climbed. Streets tilt sharply, stairs replace sidewalks, and routes that look short on a map become physical commitments. You don't wander here, you calculate, and that constant effort reshapes the experience fast. What catches visitors off guard is how little of the city matches the polished images they came for. Outside carefully framed viewpoints, maintenance is uneven. Infrastructure feels tired. Things that look charming online feel worn in real life. The contrast between expectation and reality becomes impossible to ignore after the first few hours. Movement adds another layer of friction. Funiculars don't always run when you expect them to. Navigation isn't intuitive. A wrong turn doesn't just mean backtracking, it means climbing all over again. By the end of the day, plans shrink. Energy drops. What was supposed to be leisurely becomes tactical. Valparaiso isn't trying to deceive anyone. It simply doesn't exist for comfort or ease. The city rewards patience and realism, not romantic assumptions. Travelers who arrive chasing a mood often leave frustrated, unsure why the experience felt so much heavier than advertised. This isn't a place that fails visitors outright. It disappoints them slowly, and in a city so defined by imagery, that gap between what you expected and what your body feels becomes the story you remember most. And while Valparaiso disappoints because it doesn't live up to the image, the next one on our list has the opposite problem. Here, the attention isn't missing, it's overwhelming. Number 9. Cartagena. At first, it feels flattering. You arrive, step into the historic center, and immediately feel noticed. Smiles, greetings, offers, suggestions. Everyone seems interested, but that attention doesn't fade. It multiplies, and after a while, it stops feeling welcoming and starts feeling relentless. Cartagena is a city where tourists are never anonymous. In the most visited areas, you're constantly identified as a visitor, and that status follows you everywhere. Street vendors don't rotate, they persist. Prices don't fluctuate, they inflate. Offers don't end, they stack. Walking a single block can involve half a dozen interruptions, each one small on its own, but exhausting in total. What makes this city difficult isn't a single scam or bad encounter, it's the accumulation accumulation. Saying no becomes part of the routine. Eye contact becomes a negotiation. Simple decisions like stopping to rest or taking out your phone invite immediate engagement. Even experienced travelers find themselves adjusting their behavior just to reduce attention. The pressure intensifies in predictable places, near landmarks, plazas, restaurant entrances, and especially after dark. The city's popularity has created an environment where tourism feels less like a shared experience and more like a transaction in motion. You're not exploring, you're being processed. Cartagena still delivers visually. That's not the issue. The challenge is mental fatigue. Constant interaction chips away at enjoyment, leaving visitors drained instead of inspired. By the end of the day, many travelers aren't tired from walking. They're tired from managing people. Cartagena doesn't overwhelm with danger or confusion. It overwhelms with demand. And for travelers unprepared for that level of attention, the city can feel far more draining than expected. Number 8. Medellin. This is where many travelers start feeling confident again. The city looks organized. Transportation works. Neighborhoods feel defined. Cafes are full of foreigners who seem relaxed and settled. And slowly, a dangerous thought creeps in. This feels manageable. Medellin is a city that gives visitors the impression they've figured it out. The systems make sense. The routines feel familiar. You start believing that awareness is optional, that caution was for earlier cities on the list. And that shift in mindset is where problems usually begin. The risk here isn't confusion, it's overconfidence. Travelers stay out later than planned. They trust recommendations without questioning motives. They assume that because yesterday went smoothly, tomorrow will too. Medellin doesn't correct that assumption immediately. It lets it grow. What makes this city tricky is how selectively it reveals its boundaries. Certain areas feel completely fine, even late at night. Others change tone quietly and without warning. The transition isn't dramatic. There's no obvious signal telling you it's time to leave. And for visitors who rely on instinct rather than local context, that subtlety matters. Medellin rewards people who treat it with steady caution, but it punishes shortcuts, especially social ones. Trust is extended quickly here, and not always for the right reasons. Situations escalate not because travelers are reckless, but because they're comfortable. This city isn't chaotic or hostile, it's persuasive. It convinces visitors they're in control long before they actually are. And for many, the mistake isn't doing something risky, it's believing risk was no longer part of the equation. And once confidence replaces caution, the next city overwhelms you in a different way. Here, the challenge isn't trusting yourself too much, it's figuring out where to even begin. Number 7. Bogota. One of the first things visitors notice here is the absence of a clear focal point. There's no single center that naturally pulls everything together. Instead, activity is spread across multiple areas, each functioning almost independently. For travelers used to orienting themselves around one main district, that alone changes how the city feels. Days here are shaped less by attractions and more by geography. What appears close on a map often isn't close in practice. Moving between areas takes time, and timing becomes part of every decision. A plan that looks simple in the morning can quietly stretch into something far more demanding by afternoon. Nothing breaks, but momentum fades. This layout affects how visitors experience the city. Rather than drifting from place to place, you're encouraged to commit. Choose a zone. Stay with it. Build your day around where you already are. Travelers who try to cover too much often end up spending more time in transit than engaging with anything meaningful. The pace reflects that structure. Streets stay active, but not rushed. Movement feels steady, not chaotic. There's a sense that the city operates on parallel tracks rather than one shared rhythm. Once you recognize that, navigation becomes less frustrating, but it rarely becomes effortless. What makes this city sit higher on the list is that adaptation actually pays off. After a day or two, patterns emerge. Routes make sense, decisions feel less draining, the experience stabilizes, not because the city simplifies itself, but because expectations adjust. This isn't a place that overwhelms or intimidates. It asks for selectivity, for travelers willing to slow down, narrow their focus, and accept that not everything connects cleanly. The city offers a steady, workable experience. It doesn't reward urgency, but it does respond well to intention. Number 6. Cusco. This is a place many travelers arrive with a schedule already written in their heads. There's a sense that time is limited and every hour needs to count. Tickets are booked, day trips are lined up, expectations are high before the first step outside. What often gets underestimated is how demanding the experience can be, even without obvious obstacles. Days start early and run long. Movement happens at elevation. Streets rise and fall constantly. Simple walks take more effort than expected, and recovery time quietly disappears from the plan. The body slows down long before the itinerary does. The pressure doesn't come from the city itself. It comes from the weight of what people think they're supposed to accomplish. Travelers push through fatigue because skipping something feels like wasting the trip. Meals become rushed. Rest gets postponed. By the third or fourth day, exhaustion replaces curiosity. There's also an intensity to how everything is organized around visitors. Services are efficient but firm. Schedules are fixed. Miss a window and the opportunity doesn't always come back. That rigidity amplifies stress, especially for travelers who assumed flexibility would come naturally. What makes this city rank higher than many others is that the experience can work beautifully if expectations shift. Those who slow down, trim plans, and leave space to adjust tend to enjoy it far more. The city doesn't punish visitors, but it doesn't bend around them either. This isn't a place that overwhelms through chaos or confusion. It challenges through ambition. And for travelers willing to trade completion for balance, the experience becomes not just manageable, but genuinely rewarding. And this is where the list starts to shift. From this point on, we're no longer talking about cities that wear travelers down, but places that consistently reward them. And at number 5, we start with a city that didn't become famous for landmarks, but for what's on the plate. A place that's collected international culinary awards, regularly ranks among the world's top food capitals, and turned local dishes into global exports. Do you already know which one it is? Number 5. Lima. At some point, most travelers hear the same thing. The food here is incredible, and it's easy to be skeptical. Every destination claims great cuisine. Every list has a food capital. Expectations rise so high that disappointment almost feels inevitable. And then you actually arrive. What stands out isn't just flavor, it's how seriously food is treated at every level. Meals aren't rushed or improvised. Ingredients are intentional. Seafood arrives hours out of the water. Acidity, spice, and texture are balanced with precision rather than excess. This isn't comfort food dressed up for tourists. It's a culinary identity that knows exactly what it's doing. The recognition didn't come out of nowhere. International culinary awards, global rankings, and chef-driven innovation put the city on the map. But what surprises visitors is how consistent the quality feels beyond famous names. Markets, casual spots, and everyday lunches reflect the same confidence. You don't have to chase excellence here. It's woven into daily life. But this city doesn't rely on food alone to carry the experience. What makes it work is how easy it is to exist between meals. Neighborhoods are straightforward. Days unfold without constant adjustment. You can explore, rest, eat well, and repeat without friction. That balance matters, because if the city itself felt stressful, the food would become an escape. Here, it becomes a complement, something that enhances the rhythm instead of compensating for it. Yes, the food really is that good. Arguably among the best in the world. But what pushes this city into the top 5 is that once the plates are cleared, the experience still holds together. And that's rarer than it sounds. Number 4. Sao Paulo. This is the point on the list where size stops being a liability and starts becoming an advantage. Everything here operates on a larger scale. But unlike smaller cities that struggle with that weight, this one is built to carry it. What surprises many travelers is how functional the experience feels once you stop trying to see it all. This isn't a city for highlights, it's a city for choice. Whatever you're interested in, there's not just one option, but dozens. And if one plan falls through, another replaces it almost immediately. That flexibility changes how travel days feel. Movement takes effort, but it's predictable. Systems are established, patterns repeat. Once you understand how neighborhoods specialize, business, culture, nightlife, food, the city becomes easier to navigate than its reputation suggests. It doesn't ask for perfection in planning, only realism. What sets this city apart from others lower on the list is resilience. It absorbs people. Schedules adjust. Services adapt. You're rarely stuck with a single outcome. That reliability matters, especially for travelers who don't want every decision to feel high stakes. There's also a sense of momentum here. Days don't stall. Even slower moments feel intentional rather than accidental. You're not waiting for the city to open up. It's already moving, and you step into the flow where it suits you. This isn't a place that charms instantly or explains itself quickly, but for travelers who appreciate options, consistency, and the ability to pivot without stress, it delivers something rare in the region: scale without chaos. And if the last city runs on scale and momentum, the next one is driven by ritual. Here, evenings revolve around long dinners, conversations stretch over thick cuts of beef, and ordering a steak isn't a choice, it's an expectation. Number 3. Buenos Aires. There's a rhythm to this city that most travelers recognize almost immediately. Days ease in slowly, evenings stretch longer than planned, and meals are rarely treated as something to rush through. Dinner isn't a stop between activities, it's the anchor everything else revolves around. Yes, the steak reputation is real. Thick cuts, simple preparation, confidence without explanation. Ordering feels less like a decision and more like a formality. What surprises many visitors isn't just the quality, but how central these shared meals are to everyday life. Tables fill up late, conversations linger. Time loosens its grip, but the appeal goes beyond what's on the plate. The city itself feels lived in, not curated for visitors. Neighborhoods have their own identities, routines, and loyalties. Cafes function as extensions of living rooms. Streets feel social rather than transactional. You don't feel rushed through experiences. You're invited to settle into them. What makes the experience work so well is familiarity. Even when things aren't perfect, they're understandable. You know how the day will unfold. You learn the patterns quickly. That sense of predictability creates comfort, especially for travelers spending more than a few days. There are challenges, of course. Economic realities show themselves. Small inconveniences pop up, but they rarely derail the experience. They become part of the context rather than the focus. This is a city that doesn't try to impress loudly. It wins people over through consistency, routine, and atmosphere. Long after the trip ends, what many travelers remember isn't a single landmark, but a feeling of having belonged there, if only briefly. And now we move on to the city that defines South America for millions of people, the one that feels familiar even before you set foot in it. Number 2. Rio de Janeiro. This is the city people imagine when they think of South America. The views are cinematic, the setting feels exaggerated, and the contrast between ocean, mountains, and city life looks almost unreal. Few places make such a strong first impression, and even fewer live up to it as consistently as this one does. What makes the experience so powerful is how alive everything feels. Beaches aren't just scenery, they're social spaces. Music spills into the streets. Days flow naturally into evenings without needing much planning. It's easy to understand why so many travelers fall for the city within hours of arriving. But that intensity comes with responsibility. This is a place where awareness matters, not constantly, not anxiously, but intentionally. Certain areas operate smoothly, others require more judgment. Knowing when to blend in, when to move on, and when to simplify plans makes a real difference. Travelers who approach the city with confidence and restraint tend to have the best experience. What separates Rio from cities lower on the list is that caution doesn't cancel enjoyment, it supports it. You don't have to hold back completely, you just need to read the room. Small adjustments go a long way. Timing, location, and how you carry yourself often matter more than rigid rules. Rio doesn't promise ease, it offers reward. For travelers willing to stay present and make smart choices, the payoff is huge. Moments here don't feel staged or packaged, they feel earned. This isn't a city you conquer or fully control, it's one you engage with. And when you do that well, it delivers something unforgettable: energy, beauty, and memories that stay long after the trip ends. And with only one spot left, this is where everything comes together. No chaos, no constant adjustments, just a city that consistently works the way travelers hope it will. Ready to see the winner? Number 1. Santiago. This is the city that quietly does what many others struggle with. It doesn't overwhelm, it doesn't demand constant adjustment, and it doesn't test your patience just to prove a point. Things work here, and that alone already sets it apart. From the moment you arrive, there's a sense of structure. Transportation is readable. Neighborhoods are clearly defined. Daily routines follow patterns that are easy to understand, even for first-time visitors. You don't spend energy figuring out how the city functions. You spend it deciding what you want to do within it. What makes the experience especially comfortable is balance. The pace is steady without feeling slow. Services are consistent without feeling rigid. You can plan ahead or change your mind without either choice backfiring. That reliability removes friction from the trip in a way travelers often don't appreciate until it's missing elsewhere. The setting adds to that feeling. Mountains frame the city instead of crowding it. Space feels intentional. Even busy days have a sense of order, as if the city knows how to absorb movement without turning it into stress. Santiago isn't flashy. It doesn't try to sell itself through spectacle. Instead, it delivers something more valuable: predictability, clarity, and ease. For travelers looking to explore South America without constantly recalibrating expectations, that stability becomes the highlight. This is the kind of city that doesn't fight your plans. It supports them, and that's exactly why it finishes at the top. And that brings us to the end of the list, with Santiago closing out the ranking. From cities that challenge you to places that quietly make travel easier, every stop on this list tells a different story. Now I want to hear from you. Which city surprised you the most with its place in the ranking? And which one would you still visit anyway? Let me know in the comments. And if you want more breakdowns like this, honest, practical, and straight to the point, make sure to like the video and subscribe. There's plenty more coming.